Going backstage was always wonderful. You felt such an air of excitement.
Lee Radziwill knows firsthand what it was like to live in the shadow of another person her whole life. To make matters worse, her elder sister was the one who stole the show, not some random person. It appeared that Jacqueline, Lee's sister, was better than Lee. More ambitious, more socially prominent, more wealthy, and even married to the guy who was claimed to have Lee's eye at one point. Despite Lee's intelligence, outspokenness, and style, Lee lived a solitary life and kept her wealth under wraps until the day she died at the age of 85. Even though she bequeathed her entire fortune to a single beneficiary in her will, several people were suspicious of one specific provision. Examining Lee Radziwill's life, we can see his jealousy, controversies, and achievements. New York City's Doctors' Hospital was the site of Caroline Lee Bouvier's birth in 1933, marking the beginning of a tumultuous existence. Jack Bouvier III was a stockbroker, and Janet Norton Lee was a famous socialite. They were her parents. People started referring to her as Lee, her middle name instead of her initial name, and the practice persisted. Jacqueline, her older sister, went on to marry future President John F. Kennedy. The two sisters were close throughout their childhood. Lee resided on Park Avenue for the most of her childhood. They would spend peaceful summers in the Hamptons when her family wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life. Lee attended many secondary institutions, each of which provided her with an excellent education. She studied at Miss Porter's School in Farmington, Connecticut, the Potomac School in Washington, D.C., and the Chapin School in New York City. However, she had no idea that her life would be so turbulent and eventful from the time she finished her studies until the very end. We will reveal our meaning to you when the time is right, so stay tuned. In her first year of college, Lee attended Sarah Lawrence College, but she transferred to an Italian art school in her second year. The family name comes from the famous Wall Street figure Jack Bouvier III, who was also known as Black Jack. But he was not without his issues. He enjoyed being around many different ladies and drank heavily. Because of this, tensions rose in the household, and Lee's parents finally divorced when he was a teenager. Despite their parents' divorce, Lee and Jacqueline maintained their position as New York royalty. They were still quite influential and had many valuable ties in the upper class. Their mother took them in after remarrying to Hugh Auchincloss. Entering his spacious Virginia mansion, he warmly greeted them. In contrast, their dad remained unmarried. Jacqueline was Hugh's third and last wife. He had been married previous to his marriage to Lee's mother. Lee believed that their dad gave Jacqueline more attention than she did, even though the two of them stayed in touch with their dad while living apart. Lee even had mild jealousy toward her sister on occasion. Jacqueline was 3 years Lee's senior, and their parents adored her. All of Jacqueline's teachers raved about how brilliant she was in the classroom. Hugh had 3 step-siblings and 2 half-siblings from his prior marriages, which Lee and Jacqueline inherited since their mother remarried. Lee made her grand entrance into society after a stint in high society following her time at university. In the December 25, 1950 edition of Life magazine, she was featured in the debutante section. Unfortunately, Lee's aspirations for professional success were abruptly dashed due to her private life, despite the magazine's stunning full-page photo of her flaunting her beauty to the world. See, Lee was married more than once, and each marriage had its unique history. At the tender age of 21, on April 18, 1953, she tied the knot for the first time. Michael Temple Canfield was her husband. He was a publisher. As her father, Jack Bouvier III, escorted her down the aisle, she had a brief moment of pure magic. To Lee, Michael exemplified the ideal spouse. He was attractive, intelligent, and had many contacts. More significantly, though, he gave her a path out from her troubled mother-daughter relationship. Following their nuptials, Lee and Michael relocated to a stately home in London's Chester Square. Things appeared to be going swimmingly at first. It seemed as if Lee were in a fairy tale as she was showered with affection. But Michael had a major problem. He couldn't control his drinking. He drank excessively despite being the CEO of a major publishing firm and having an excellent education. Lee was unable to enter their room when he passed out one day. The door had been closed. Michael needed this as a wake-up call. For the sake of his marriage, he was aware that he had to make some changes. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't manage to kick his drinking habit. Stanislaw Albrecht Radziwill was a Polish-Lithuanian prince whom Lee met and fell in love with when her marriage was crumbling. The marriage of Jacqueline to John F. Kennedy had already taken place by that point. The Kennedys had to mediate so that Lee could wed Prince Stanislaw. On March 19, 1959, Lee wed a genuine prince for the second time after they succeeded in having his marriage to Michael annulled through talks with the Pope and the Vatican. The fact that Michael would have become a prince in his own right had the allegations about his biological father being a royal persisted, which is ironic in and of itself. Prince Stanislaw and Lee went on to have 2 children as a married couple. Anthony and Christina were their names. The family's residence near Buckingham Palace proved that monarchy does, in fact, attract other royals. Yet the marriage did not last, and many speculations circulated regarding the reasons behind its demise. Rumor has it that Prince Stanislaw had a plethora of extramarital encounters. Aristotle Onassis, a Greek shipping magnate and Lee's brother-in-law, was also developing feelings for her. A photographer called Peter Beard was also allegedly associated with her. Their 1974 divorce was the result of all these factors. Lee reflected on her relationship with Prince Stanislaw in a subsequent interview. Even though she had past crushes and flings, she never felt fulfilled or had a better grasp on life's meaning until she was with Stas. The period she spent married to Stas was the most joyous of her life. Clearly, she adored him. Lee chose to give love another go after her marriage to Prince Stanislaw failed. She left the realm of monarchy and aristocracy in 1988 when she wed Herbert Ross, a film director. Herbert achieved great achievement and had a significant impact in his realm. Steel Magnolias, Sam, Play It Again, and The Goodbye Girl were among his critically acclaimed films. They had their wedding reception in Lee's Fifth Avenue apartment. They had an intimate meal at Jackie Kennedy's New York residence following the ceremony. They had to do what many Americans avoid marriage for, which is unfortunate, because their marriage also didn't endure forever. A divorce was finalized between them in 2001. Herbert was quite unlike from anybody else Lee had dated previously, in her opinion. Furthermore, she spoke clean about her hatred of Hollywood and its insularity, despite the fact that becoming a member of the film industry had first seemed appealing. Unsurprisingly, Lee's sister Jacqueline had been at her side for the longest period of time. Taking a deeper look at their relationship will reveal why it had the greatest ups and downs in Lee's life. Lee and Jacqueline had a strong bond for many years, despite Lee's insecurity about her own abilities compared to her sister. They had a very close relationship as adults, particularly during Jacqueline's tenure as First Lady. They spent a lot of time together, including during holidays and other gatherings of family and friends. Attending formal functions together, they made stops at the White property and even hosted the Kennedys at their London property. Their month-long 1962 vacation together to Pakistan, India, and Italy was one of their most renowned vacations. Caroline was technically Lee's initial name, but everyone nicknamed her Lee. Naming their first daughter Lee was a unique method for the Kennedy family to cement their relationship. Tragically, everything changed following President Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Lee had a daughter with Prince Stanislaw, Anna Christina Radziwill, and even received a blessing from President Kennedy. Lee left her home in London for Washington, D.C. the moment she got the news, so she could be there for her sister Jacqueline at this trying time. As Jacqueline grieved, she found courage and comfort in Lee. As Jacqueline carried her husband's casket to the Capitol and further to the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle for the burial, Lee stood by her side. Lee was overcome with emotion as she witnessed the reverent tipped wing of the massive Air Force One jet above Arlington National Cemetery during the ceremony. As time went on, it became clear that Lee really respected Jacqueline's courage. She showed her sister Jacqueline how much she cared by leaving tiny notes on her pillow. Lee played a pivotal role on Jacqueline's final day as First Lady. She facilitated the relocation of Jacqueline and her children to W, a diplomat, Georgetown mansion owned by Averell Harriman. Lee continued to be of service to Jacqueline by supporting her with the relocation to her New York apartment. Lee and her Fifth Avenue apartment were only a few blocks apart. They appeared to be the epitome of a loving and supportive sisterly bond, yet issues arose in their relationship due to private matters. What follows is anyone's guess. Lee and the notoriously promiscuous Aristotle Onassis have been romantically connected in the press for some time. Their chemistry was undeniable, but they never made it official. One Greek who became wealthy was Aristotle. He was involved in shipping. As one would expect in the tight-knit realm of high society, he had a long-standing friendship with the Radziwill family. They dined at his London dinner parties and even went sailing on the Christina, his boat. In August 1963, Lee contacted Jacqueline, which sparked tension between the sisters. After Jacqueline's baby Patrick was delivered prematurely and tragically died the next day, she wished to encourage Jacqueline to remain aboard Aristotle's boat. Jacqueline needed space to grieve in solitude since she was crushed. While aboard the yacht with Aristotle, Deanna Du Bois discusses Jacqueline's impact on him at length in her 1995 book, In Her Sister's Shadow, an intimate biography of Lee Radziwill. Lee informed her closest friends that inviting Jacqueline on the yacht was an act of pure charity, but Jacqueline allegedly manipulated Aristotle while they were on the water. The novel goes on to imply that the sisters' strained relationship was caused by Jacqueline's affinity for Aristotle. This, along with Jacqueline's deepening friendship with Robert Kennedy following the president's murder, altered the course of their relationship irrevocably. Claims that Robert Kennedy and Jacqueline were more than friends circulated at that period. Rumors began to circulate that Robert and Jacqueline were more than simply friends, following public sightings of them, engaged in intense conversation for months after the president's death, which exacerbated the already tense situation. People speculated and discussed Lee's connection to Aristotle for some time, despite the lack of proof. Then, when Lee was in London in June 1968, news broke that Bobby Kennedy had been murdered. She was in an automobile accident due to her extreme anger. A greater sense of catastrophe befell her sibling. It seemed to her that the Kennedys were no longer secure in the United States. It appeared to be the sole reasonable course of action, so Jacqueline made up her mind that she had to go. The fact that Aristotle Onassis escorted her to the exit nevertheless was intriguing. Following this, Jacqueline and Aristotle had a love relationship. They went so far as to promise Jacqueline millions of dollars in a prenuptial agreement. It was 5 years after the president's assassination that Jacqueline and Aristotle tied the knot in a lavish ceremony fit for a tabloid. Lee was there during their wedding on Scorpios, Aristotle's private island. Lee just laughed off the questions regarding the allegations that she had an affair with Aristotle. Despite the fact that they avoided discussing it publicly, it was clear that a significant breach had developed between her and her sister Jacqueline following Jacqueline's marriage to Aristotle. Despite this, she claimed to have no regrets whatsoever regarding their alleged poor relationship. Even when they were little, Jacqueline took Aristotle for herself, as Lee revealed in her journal entries. Lee had assumed that Aristotle was meant to be hers. Lee was irritated by more than just this. Even her daughter's affection seems to have been snatched away by her sibling. Christina, Lee's daughter, had a tough time controlling her weight as a kid. Because her mother was slim and lovely, she felt particularly insecure about her own figure. Then Christina's relationship with her mom deteriorated to the point that she no longer wanted to be around her. Lee was disengaged from her children's life, despite her affection for them. She failed to notice that Christina was struggling. Christina packed up her belongings and moved in with her beloved Aunt Jacqueline, who lived nearby, since she felt better there. Because of this, Lee felt intense wrath and envy. The chasm between the sisters widened as a result. In the midst of it all, Lee made some acquaintances in the art world. They rekindled her passion for painting and encouraged her to pursue her aspirations. Lee befriended a number of creative types in the 1960s as he and Jacqueline began to grow apart. Rudolf Nureyev, Margot Fonteyn, Cecil Beaton, Truman Capote, and architect and designer Renzo Mongiardino were among her pals. Truman Capote and Lee became fast friends. Among Truman's circle of influential ladies known as the Swans, Lee was included. There was a unique bond between Lee and Truman. Despite his literary accomplishment, Truman struggled with feelings of inferiority to more powerful and refined individuals. Because Lee was perpetually in her sister's shadow, she shared these sentiments, and the two of them felt at ease being with one another. Things were already intriguing, but they were about to take an exciting turn. In 1968, Lee's heart fell when Jacqueline wed Aristotle. Why her sister would act so cruelly toward her was a mystery to her. Lee was pushed to pursue acting by Truman, who wished she could escape her sister's shadow. In 1967, Lee enrolled in acting classes at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, marking the beginning of her professional acting career. Truman not only suggested that Lee give acting a go, but he also suggested that she begin with The Philadelphia Story, a comedy by Philip Barry. Tracy Lord, an ebullient socialite, would be her character in the drama. The public and media paid close attention to Lee since she was the sister of Jacqueline Kennedy. The play opened to much fanfare but received mostly negative feedback. None of the critics were fans of her acting. It has been argued that a new star is not born, according to one reviewer from the Chicago Tribune. Her performance was unnatural and amateurish, according to some reviews. Lee persisted in performing despite the severe criticism. Truman pleaded with David Susskind, a TV producer, to cast Lee in a role. They settled on remaking Gene Tierney's 1944 film Laura. Lee rose to fame after seeing Gene Tierney in a part quite similar to the one he was about to portray. The play ran on ABC for the first time in January 1968, and Truman was a contributing writer. Critics were unimpressed with Lee's performance, even after the TV play. Nobody thought she would be a fantastic performer, according to the TV reviewer for the New York Times. Returning to London, Lee decided that acting wasn't the path for her. Her friendship with Truman began to deteriorate at about the same time. Gore Vidal had sued Truman for libel, and Lee had declined to testify in the court. This led to their argument. Contrary to what Truman said, Vidal claimed that his associates just whisked him away to his hotel following an argument with Attorney General Robert Kennedy, rather than being expelled from the Kennedy White House for intoxication. As a result of Lee's refusal to testify, Truman was informed of devastating news. The case was lost on him. Even though he had to make amends with Vidal and apologize, their relationship continued. The secret-telling reputation Truman had ultimately doomed their friendship. The fact that Truman Capote exposed Lee's confidante's details on her sister's problematic relationship was a betrayal of her trust. Many prominent ladies were Truman's acquaintances, and he had an insatiable curiosity to learn their secrets. He was certain he could compose a masterpiece with this knowledge. Some of the things he knew were nevertheless revealed, even if the book was never published. Everyone stopped being friends with him because of this, but Lee was already hurt. Lee let her passion for fashion and design go unfulfilled while she pursued a career in acting. She collaborated with Italian stage designer Lorenzo Mongiardino for a short time in an attempt to go into interior design. They collaborated on the design of Lee and her second husband's stunning Turville Grange mansion. Notable photographers such as Cecil Beaton and Horst P. Horst were enamored with the exquisite interior decor. A plethora of images of the residence were captured. After developing a polished style while collaborating with Mongiardino, Lee chose to strike out on her own as a designer. An interior design job for a property whose occupants spent little more than a few days there every year was one of her undertakings. Because of her exceptional work, she established her own interior design firm in 1976. Lee received a great deal of good press after an extensive article about her work appeared in Architectural Digest. Lots of corporations and wealthy individuals became her clientele after that. The Vanity Fair International Best Dressed Hall of Fame even inducted Lee in 1996. She had impeccable taste in clothing, and this proved it. She had impeccable taste in more than simply clothing. When it came to her houses, she also possessed an incredible sense of style. She has 2 exquisitely furnished residences, one at 160 East 72nd Street in Manhattan and another at 49 Avenue Montaigne in Paris. In the April 2009 issue of Elle Decor, readers were treated to a glimpse of Lee's exceptional taste in interior design when the magazine showcased her stunning houses. Sofia Coppola and Lee conducted a life story chat in February 2013. While appearing on the cover of the New York Times Style magazine, she discussed her personal life and the significance of privacy in the modern world. Although Lee's sister Jacqueline was dealing with her own problems at the time, she was named one of the 50 most fashionable persons aged 50 and up by The Guardian in 2013, further cementing Lee's position as a style hero. Aristotle Onassis and Jacqueline had marital problems, according to the rumors. Following the dissolution of her marriage, Jacqueline made frequent trips to New York to be near her children's schools. Approximately $20 to $26 million were left to Jacqueline by Aristotle upon his death in 1975. Even though his daughter got the most of his fortune, Jacqueline still got a rather sizable bequest. Jacqueline succumbed to her deepest desires when Aristotle had a way. She began her career at Doubleday as an associate editor and eventually moved on to advise for Viking Press. Her passion for art, history, and preservation of old sites persisted. When New York City's Grand Central Terminal was under danger in the 1970s, Jacqueline was instrumental in saving it. The private life of Jacqueline was also in the news. Maurice Tempelsman, a diamond merchant from Belgium, was her lifelong partner and romantic interest for the last 12 years. Shortly after receiving a diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1994, Jacqueline died at her apartment in New York City. John F. Kennedy, her husband, and their 2 children were all put to repose in Arlington National Cemetery with her. Following Jacqueline's demise, a new development in their long-running rivalry was exposed in her will. Within her will, Jacqueline made care to provide for her children, spokesperson, executor, and charitable organizations. Interestingly, she gave Lee's children, Anthony and Tina, $500,000 apiece, but she left Lee nothing. There was no need to continue providing help after Jacqueline passed away because she had done enough for Lee throughout her lifetime, according to her will. Their relationship was obviously highly strained, damaged even in death, as you can tell from the beautiful language. The passing of Lee Radziwill, on the other side, demonstrates her unwavering commitment to the fashion business throughout her life. Lee had a strong bond with Giorgio Armani, who regarded her as a major source of inspiration. Nonetheless, she encountered financial difficulties in her final days, and the decisions she had to make devastated her. She did not get an inheritance that would allow her to live the way her sister did. For financial reasons, she had to liquidate her Parisian flat along with other assets. It is said that a trust fund that her mother established provided for her financially. At the age of 85, Lee gently died away in February 2019 at her home in New York from natural causes. Lee endured challenging times in his personal and professional lives, but he endured it all with grace, flair, and an unwavering commitment to the arts. On February 25th, Lee was laid to rest at New York City's St. Thomas More Church, with many notable people from the fashion and arts industries paying their respects. Marc Jacobs, Caroline Kennedy, Carol Radziwill, Dita Blair, Sofia Coppola, Carolina Herrera, Peter Beard, and Andre Leon Talley were among those who attended. Her distinct sense of humor and endearing personality were lauded, as she was acknowledged for her substantial contributions to culture and fashion. Despite whispers about her money woes while she was alive, Lee's estate was worth more than $50 million when she passed away. She left her vast wealth to her daughter, Anna Christina Tina Radziwill, in her September 2018 will. But there was an odd clause that said her daughter would only get half of what her estate was worth. An unusual addition that Lee made to her will perplexed many. Instead of her daughter, she named 2 male acquaintances who were not in her close circle as her executors. Curious eyes were drawn to this choice, particularly because the selected executors were financially positioned to gain substantial profits from overseeing her inheritance. After Lee's will was made public, the distribution of her multi-million-dollar legacy was revealed, leading to much conjecture and surprise. Lee had spent her whole life as second fiddle to the First Lady, but with her last act she made sure that her daughter, whom she had abandoned, would get the respect and assistance she needed. The cultural and fashion spheres will always remember Lee, and her last acts ensured that her daughter would be well cared for after she passed away. Despite dealing with envy, career failures, and rocky relationships, Lee Radziwill was able to achieve outstanding success because to her excellent style. Throughout their decades-long partnership, Giorgio Armani frequently sought her out for ideas. He lauded her refined sense of style, which prioritized subtlety over showiness. Lee became famous as an accomplished artist and received extensive praise for her distinctive and textural approach to home design. Her remarkable eye for aesthetics is on display in museums thanks to exhibitions staged in the houses she previously called home. The uniqueness of her style is still remembered by everyone who saw it, even if she sold her Paris pied-à-terre when she was older. In addition to being a trailblazer in the world of fashion, Lee was known for her outrageous sunglasses and traditional pillbox hats, which harkened back to the legendary style of Jacqueline Kennedy. Her impeccable taste in clothing is a certain way to win over fans for years to come. The magnitude of Lee's bequest was a shock to many upon her death in February 2019. Lee evidently kept her money issues under wraps, much like her stylish boucle-knit turbans. Christina, her daughter, will get most of her assets when all bills and debts are paid. Christina may decide to honor her mother's passion for real estate by using her inheritance to buy homes. There are a lot of ways Christina may put the enormous sum of money she received to use. She could choose to put her money into real estate, for example. She has spent her whole life in New York City, so she could put her energy into real estate there. Another option would be for her to invest in foreign real estate, marking the conclusion of a chapter in her family's past. Christina can now afford to take lavish vacations as her mother, Lee Radziwill, did thanks to her large bequest. From the time she was 85 years old until her untimely death, Lee maintained an air of mystery, captivating audiences with her refined charisma and exceptional intelligence. Lee may have maintained a well-constructed image for more than 8 decades by purposefully concealing some parts of her life. Lee was her sister's shadow. But what do you make of her life and work despite this? Put your thoughts down below. We're curious. If you thought this video was great, please subscribe to our channel, like it, and share it with anybody you think may appreciate it. Much obliged for your time.